think that comes out today, doesn't it?
Last week.
Oh, last week?
Friday.
Ah. So, oh, you've already seen it? Yeah. Didn't like it?
I'm a massive fan of the stage show.
Yeah.
But how have you taken 2 hours, 20 minute stage show and turned it into a 2.5 hour part 1 and a 2.5 hour part 2 of a film?
Oh, I didn't know. So, I didn't know it was a part 1, part 2.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so you get to the end and then you're like, oh.
Yeah, and then the part 2, it's not even like a new story, it's the same story. They're not putting out until this time next year.
Yeah, typical, isn't it?
I'd have forgotten.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing they want you to do. They want you to go watch it on Disney or something, don't they? I'm assuming it's going to be Disney, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, then. So, everyone, this is Duncan.
How do you do?
So, Duncan, you run a charity.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell people about that charity?
Yeah. So the charity is called We Are Survivors, and the organisation supports boys and men who have been affected by, we call it sexual harms. Yeah. Majority of the lads that we support are adult survivors of sexual abuse that happened in childhood. And then there's about 20-25% of the guys that we support are men where something's happened more recently. Okay.
So do you want to go into different areas of that?
Yeah. So let me tell you the story of the organisation.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah. So the organisation, as I say, started nearly 16 years ago. Well, February 2025 will be 16 years old. And the sort of the history of the organisation starts about 18 years ago when I was training to be a psychotherapist and when I was working within the NHS. And I was also working within the LGBT community as well. So that's where my clinical practice was. I was coming up against a lot of men who had experienced some form of sexual harms and were unable to kind of talk about it and had got involved in drug issues, alcohol, quite a lot of like problematic drinking, problematic behaviour, risky behaviours. And that sort of led me to kind of go, oh, I think I've got something to talk about here. And then everything kind of came out about my own experience. So I was abused when I was a child from round about 11 to about 16, 17. And sort of at the same time, I was kind of like discovering who I was sexually, discovering who I was as my sexuality, sexual orientation, coming out. And I suppose the kind of the infusion of the two things led me to really unhealthy sexual behaviours. Yeah. Really unhealthy. And I suppose I just locked it all up. And then, 20 years later, it all just came pouring out. And then I've just been on this fucking crusade to do two things. So first of all, to tell all our fellow men out there that if you have experienced something that you see as being problematic, then there's support and help out there for you. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. It doesn't have to be kind of doom and gloom. We can deal with stuff. But then the second bit to it is I am so tired of the kind of the narrative, the stories that you hear, where there's been sexual harms that happened and then, these sort of people go through terrible sort of, like I say, drug, alcohol, etc., etc. And then what we never do is we never talk about, well, how do we get sex back? And I am very, very, very much into like, how can we be sex positive? How can we reclaim sex? Yeah,
so it's like, so these problems you developed is linked to your sex now, whether it be like you associate your drugs and alcohol with sex. You're like, once someone's now sober, it's like, you now have to be a priest.
Yeah. And like, there's loads of stuff that's been written about for women. So kind of, there's quite a famous thing around the orgasm after rape. So How do women reclaim kind of orgasm? Because a big taboo that nobody kind of wants to talk about is the fact that during the most horrific thing that can happen, she can often orgasm. And so there's something about like those two things feel like they kind of shouldn't go together.
Yeah.
So how does she enter into like a new sex life? How can she have orgasm after this terrible thing so you don't associate the two things together?
Yeah.
So little is talked about with men.
So, yeah, I was actually just... I've not really thought of it before. Now you've said it, I've kind of seen it portrayed in stories on TV and in film where there's been that horrendous experience where it's them obviously trying to go at it again. But I've never seen it in men. Because I can imagine like ED being quite a big thing.
Huge.
Yeah. So once you've been assaulted, you might I can't perform.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. So kind of like that sort of performance anxiety that kind of goes with it. But also, there's a book that was like a text that was written 70s, I think it is, that it's called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
So this idea of when we've experienced trauma, we hold it within our body. So for me, one of the things that I used to really rally against was somebody putting their arm on my shoulder.
Okay.
So I'd be at the bar, back in the early 90s, absolutely off my kite, all over the place, being an absolute idiot, and somebody would put their hand on my shoulder to go, oh, come on, stop being, and I would just go berserk.
Yeah.
Because it was like in some way, like during the abuse, a switch got put there, and it got left there, and then the moment someone touches me, it triggers me.
Curious, at that time, did you know that's why that was a trigger?
No,
so
absolutely
with you
not.
saying it was 20 years and you buried it, and then now you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah, it was literally that, like, oh my God. And even like, like I say, 20 years later, looking back and going, so many of my behaviours, so I grew up in the early 90s in Manchester. There's also a context to this of early 90s in Manchester was absolutely amazing. At one point, we were the epicentre of dance culture. We were the epicentre of gay culture.
Yeah.
And, I had the most wildest times. Would I have had those times, and would I have done those things, and would I have got involved in so many really risky sexual behaviours? Would I have got involved in half the things that I was involved with, should I not have experienced abuse beforehand? And I suppose half of me goes, no. The serious half of me goes, no. In some way, when you've been violated sexually, your boundaries are just smashed. And so I had no boundaries going into adulthood kind of thing. But then also, I know loads of people that didn't have this experience that were just as wild as I was. And I suppose there's something for me about maybe there's a truth to both of them. Maybe my trauma led me to have few boundaries, led me to putting myself into very risky situations, but also growing up and finding Manchester in the 90s was another thing of, well, hey, tons of fucking dick all over the place.
Well, yeah, I mean, I could imagine, like, for a lot of people, like you're saying, the abuse, it may have led on to experience this, but it could have been, you would have, but it might have just been delayed.
Yeah.
And we're not, like, I know, cause we've actually spoke before, by the way, this is never our, this is our first time meeting. And yeah, I imagine, like, because something that you're quite a big advocate of is people go experience stuff, do things, but maybe just do it under the right safety measures, or just know where you are. And
which is why I was like genuinely so grateful to you when our mutual friend kind of said, I was talking to a friend of mine who does a lot of porn and does a lot of content creation, and I was kind of saying to him, oh, I really want to kind of engage with members of my own community, of the LGBT community, the wider community, because I just think there's been a lot of harms in our community, and we just need to talk about it.
Yeah.
And and then we were doing this project called On It, website onit.org.uk. Go and have a look. There's nothing better than being told about consent, drug use, HIV, and sex from drag queens. That's what it's about. Yeah.
I think, I remember this now. And they're doing videos, aren't they? And they're doing their piece saying...
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got Shazza Face on there, who's a drag queen that's so well known in Manchester. You've got one of the original UK Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. For any LGBT people my age, 21 and above. Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence were they were shouting when we were all scared, when HIV and AIDS hit. Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence were doing phenomenal work. So you've got Sister Bang Bangladesh.
Yeah.
And then...
What a name.
Amazing, and phenomenal outfits as well.
Yeah.
And I think Sister Bang Bangladesh might have been very heavily involved in Hellfire, which was a big kink night in Manchester donkeys years ago. And then the beautiful and gorgeous Cheddar Gorgeous of what is now RuPaul's Drag Race fame. And Cheddar's been an advocate and a helper of ours for 10, 15 years.
Yeah. So On It is linked with everything you're on about. That's got a place where people can reach out, get help for things. Okay, so before we actually go into this help, I'm Ethan Bradbury. This is the Fuck Me podcast, sponsored by Fuck Me. So sponsored by us. If you want to go check out fuckmemerch.com, that's where you can help support us and keep this podcast going.
Quality.
There we go. But we're going to get back into your charity now.
Yeah.
So obviously you said we're a charity that is there to help boys, men.
Yep.
What help?
So a whole load of stuff. So we've kind of begin with this reaching out to different men, different communities to say, if this is something that you've experienced, if you have experienced sexual violence at a way that is very obvious and you feel that you just can't say anything, know that there's a space to say something. Know that you can be anonymous in this space.
Okay, so that's big for a lot of people.
Massive thing.
So,
and then from that, there's then kind of like a sort of a process that we kind of go through. So people can kind of engage in face-to-face activities, group stuff, therapy. We have this thing called an ISVA, which is a ISVA. Independent Sexual Violence Advisor.
Okay.
So effectively, it's like supporting an individual to go from report, if that's what they want to do, from report all the way through to court, and literally just be supported through that whole process.
Okay.
We also work in prison, so we've got services in all 15 prisons across the Northwest.
I didn't even know there was 15 prisons in the Northwest.
Yeah. And 15 also includes the women's prison as well, style, HMP style. So that it's not about kind of like working with somebody on the crime that they've committed. It's about working with somebody to do with the trauma that they experience. Okay. So many lads in prison. Prison's full of, yes, absolutely. I will never defend somebody's actions that led them into prison. Yeah. But I am a massive fan, and it's part of my core that everybody gets a second chance.
Yeah, the whole point of prison is rehabilitation.
Absolutely,
and
without a doubt.
What you can be saying is potential that trauma that may have happened when they're younger has led to their behaviour now. Yeah. And if they're meant to rehab who they are to not commit a crime again, you might have to start you will have to start the origin, which is huge.
Massively. And part of our kind of work on it, and we do that with George House Trust, the phenomenal HIV charity that we should all be so proud of that we've got here in Greater Manchester and the Northwest. Part of like kind of the idea came from this idea of, second chances, trauma, because, donkeys years ago, I worked in drug and alcohol services.
Yeah.
And so often what I noticed was people who were experiencing flashbacks and trauma, and they were self-medicating.
Yeah.
Whether that is kind of go out on a weekend, get absolutely smashed, or the other end to it, which was so many of our clients were injecting drug users, heroin users, and there's something about when people are living on the edges of society that they kind of get forgotten about.
Yeah.
And mixed in with all of that was sort of a bit of my first step into working with sex workers. So I set up a clinic for sex workers to make sure that they have access to condoms, lube, clean injecting equipment from a harm reduction point of view.
Yeah.
That's what On It's about.
Yeah.
That's what On It's about. It's about harm reduction. And that's why kind of talking to friends and then kind of being introduced to you and you saying, yeah, do you know what? We've kind of got to do something about our community and say, look, it'd be better if you didn't do stuff, but if you are going to do it, how can we give you the right information to do things safer?
Yeah.
There isn't a safe, there's just a safer.
Yeah, it's like, for example, I was actually having a conversation the other day with someone about GHB.
Sure.
And me and you spoke about this, saying like how dangerous it can be. Like, I've never taken GHB, I've never done chemsex, never done anything like that. But it was the conversation we had was about the people, because people use it as a spiking drug and whatnot.
Yeah.
And how fucking dangerous that is, because you get that wrong with alcohol.
Well, like, it's so difficult to work out how much G to take, which is the bit that goes between, like, is this one tiny little droplet the bit that's going to go over?
And that can just kill someone.
Kill somebody, yeah.
Crazy.
Like, part of me sometimes I think, like, if I was working in drug and alcohol services now with lots of, gay men, bi men, men who have sex with men, with the kink community, of which we used to, what would my harm reduction advice be for some of the stuff that people are doing?
Go, let's list that off. Let's do some.
So for stuff like G, there is like the best harm reduction advice I could come up with was something about stick to what you know.
Yeah.
So you're only getting from the person that you normally get from, not mixing that up, making sure that you're not taking too much alcohol, making sure that you're staying, because what you don't want is alcohol and G. That becomes even more dangerous. Making sure that there's, you literally are testing. You're only doing tiny little bits. Know your limits. Know who you're using with. Real basic kind of harm reduction advice that we've been doing for donkey's years with drug and alcohol. But then you kind of get into what, we've got a major problem in the UK and in the States with crystal meth.
Okay.
Far too many people on the gay scene are taking crystal meth and are using crystal meth, and genuinely, my harm reduction advice for crystal meth is don't do it. That's a really bad thing that we haven't really got harm reduction advice for some of this stuff.
The thing is, I wouldn't know where to start. So, like you're saying, it's quite on the rise, and I've never actually ever seen someone doing crystal, but I know people have.
Yeah,
because just the conversations.
Well, yeah, it's one of the main drugs that's in with chemsex now.
Really?
Yeah, and it's so dangerous. It's so dangerous, and I, like I say, like I am such a advocate for positive sex, and that doesn't mean like boring sex. If you want to do whatever you want to do, knock yourself out. As long as it's consensual, as long as it's legal and consensual. And when I say consensual, I don't mean just one person goes, oh, okay. Like, go out, really enjoy it, do whatever, but do it safe. Do it in a way where both people after you've shot your load, you're just going to feel great about it. Like, there's something for me about, let's start being really clear about sex is brilliant. It's fucking amazing. But we're in times where, because of drugs and because of the way that sometimes, and it genuinely proper breaks my heart from a community point of view, from our community, from my community, that effectively there's people who are going into chemsex parties. I'm not here to judge. If that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it. Do it safer. But people are experiencing things that they shouldn't be experiencing. People are finding themselves in situations where they haven't consented to half the things that that have happened to them, but it's happened to them whilst they've been under the influence.
Yeah, like you, when we first met, you told me that story of the guy coming to while he was passed out in a sling, and there was a group, like a queue of people.
Literally a queue of people.
And that horrified me, to be honest.
And you know, and that's when, I think that's when I first started kind of going, oh, is this a problem? And then for anybody that that knows this kind of area, David Stewart, who was, I would argue, is kind of the expert around chemsex.
Who's that then?
So David Stewart was a guy that I suppose in some way wrote the rules for us on harm reduction in chemsex.
So was he an active person doing it himself?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he'd been a sex worker. He'd been actively engaged in chemsex. I think in Australia was where it kind of, that's where he was originally from, and then kind of came over here, tried to kind of get clean, get dry, get sober, and did so well, and then became one of, I would say, the leading experts in chemsex, and set up a chemsex clinic at 56 Dean Street.
Okay.
So 56 Dean Street were literally those, and London Friend, with Antidote, which is the drug service that London Friend run, the LGBT organisation.
Okay.
And David was just doing the most phenomenal work, and sadly during COVID, we lost David, which was a real tragedy. But David did a documentary film called Chemsex, which is well worth a watch.
Yeah.
It's also quite shocking.
Okay.
It's also quite shocking.
Do you know where you can find it?
Yeah. I mean, you can. I think it's out on DVD. I'm sure.
Who has a DVD anymore?
Well, yeah, I know. I'm sure you can stream it.
It should hopefully be on Prime.
Yes.
We'll have a search.
Yeah. There's a scene in it.
Yeah.
There's a scene in it where there's a guy that is clearly off his face.
Yeah. Oh, he's been interviewed off his face?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's been slamming. So slamming is that kind of the injection.
Oh, yeah.
Oops.
All right.
The injection of taking drugs. So usually in chemsex it's crystal meth, GHB, and then sometime meow or ket, or like cocaine can be one of them as well. But he's been slamming, and effectively he's on his phone, he's bent over, he's getting fucked behind him, and he's looking for the next chemsex party. And I remember watching that and being like, oh God, like, I don't know if you're not fully with it, because clearly you are, but are you really like engaging in full consent?
I mean, the thing is, are you also making the most of the moment? If anything, like, you've chased such a high that like you're not feeling much now. You're numb to it.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, hold on, is sex not losing its mojo? Like,
well, yeah, and I suppose like there's a question, and the documentary kind of poses a little bit of this. It's like, well, what are you chasing?
Yeah.
Are you chasing the high of the orgasm, or are you chasing the high of the drug?
Yeah.
And are those two things together, or are they separate?
Those are getting blurred now. Like your brain's just kind of going, can't really enjoy one without the other as much anymore. But saying that, actually, I did see something on someone's social media the other day, and this is just popped in my head. I didn't even have this planned because you were coming today.
Yeah.
It was someone, they're sober now, and the reason they became a full addict is because they were getting into chemsex. And it was obviously a dabble here and there.
Yeah.
And then it ended up going, I realised I took that home with me and I was just doing it sat at home on my own.
Yeah.
And then they became a full addict and now they have to, well, they're in AA meet. Well, it's not addicts.
NA.
Was it? NA,
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah.
Narcotic. Is it narcotic?
Yeah, Narcotics Anonymous. Yeah.
So, speaking of which, does your charity kind of like guide people to that if they need it?
Yeah. So like different members of my team have got different kind of specialities. So we've got people who focus really on supporting individuals to get the right support. So for somebody who might have drug and alcohol issues, what they will do is they will support individuals to find the right support and literally support them to get there, whilst also at the same time still continuing to support their behaviours. Like, so if drug and alcohol stuff goes with risky sexual behaviours, which goes with trauma, it's kind of like separating all the things out to try and work out what bit of somebody's needs are being met and what bit aren't being met.
Yeah.
So we do a whole load of that. We engage with people to really kind of support them into becoming sober. We're not an organisation where you have to be sober to come in and access us. You don't have to ring the police to come and access us. It's all about choice.
That's a huge thing for people who clearly they're going to want. Some people just want a bit of advice on harm reduction, and they're going to be like, "I'm not stopping. I enjoy this. I want to carry on." However, there's the fear that they're doing something illegal, and they're going to be contacting a business, a charity, organisation. They're like, "Well, are they going to dob me in now?"
Yeah, and that's not about that. So it's anonymous. It's confidential. Every organisation like ours has a limit to confidentiality. The limit being if we believe that there's immediate risk of harm to yourself or to another, then we might have to do something about that. But in 16 years, I think I've had to break confidentiality like 3 times. Twice the people have agreed. I think there's probably only 1 time ever that someone didn't want me to do.
And that was a matter you had to get like the police in.
I had to, because there was significant risk to someone's life, and
you got to do your bit to save someone's life.
Absolutely.
So regardless of that worry, the only time you'd ever do it is to save them or someone else.
Yes, absolutely. Apart from that, it's confidential, and I really want us as an organisation to stand shoulder to shoulder with porn stars, actors. Like, are we still talking about porn actors in this digital age of content creators? Do we still use porn stars as a phrase?
Yeah, you hear it get thrown about now, but just the word content creator, because I actually say now porn stars, are the fitness influencers of 10 years ago. Okay. Not literally, but for some people, yes. But remember, like, fitness influencers were everywhere.
Yeah.
Now it's just OnlyFans people are everywhere.
Yeah.
So, and then the new influencers.
Yes.
They're the ones, selling you on the teeth. And So, content creators now.
Content creators, yeah. So
adult content creators,
I want to stand shoulder to shoulder with adult content creators, with people in the adult industry. Yeah. Because that's where we've always come from. Yeah. We've always, many years ago, myself and a few other people, including Cheddar Gorgeous, or Michael as his real name, we set up a project called the Blue Room, and it was working with young lads. I say young lads, they were younger than me, but we're talking like 18 to about 25, 26. Okay. And there were lads who were doing what we would always talk about, lads who were doing business, usually Canal and around sort of the village area. selling sex or at risk of being exploited. And it was about art, it was about creative, it was about engaging these lads to kind of do something like that they could be really proud of. And at the very same time, my part of the work was about engaging with them to kind of make sure they've got a roof over their head, that they're not having to do survival sex.
Yeah.
That they, you know, if they are, and some of them were doing porn, but there was a bit of like, are you doing it because you feel forced into it, or are you doing it because you want to do it?
Yeah.
And it was making sure that we're meeting their needs, we're being the best people possible for these individuals. And so it's always been threaded through. And even going back to, I mean, I talk so publicly about my own experiences of sexual violence and being abused. One of the things that I don't talk about as much is about my own experiences as a sex worker.
Okay.
So there is this, and I suppose I don't talk about it as much because, first of all, there was some embarrassment and there was a ton of shame attached to it. But also because I still think that even 17, 18, 19 years into me having revealed everything about myself and being a psychotherapist and founding this charity and being the chief exec of this charity and doing all this brilliant stuff with governments to try and make it better for victims and survivors, I think there still is a little bit of shame that goes with it. And I think it's because I sometimes struggle to work out which bit was exploitation and which bit was sex work, and do the two things. And it's trying to unpack all of that. And I think that'll take me years to do that. But I'm all right with it. But the thing that I will not do is I won't be ashamed. And I stand shoulder to shoulder with my fellow survivors, with the adult entertainment industry, because there's something about I want to push us as a society to recognise there's a difference, that people who are creating adult content are not necessarily people who are being abused. There is definitely exploitation in all industries, but the two things are different. And that's what really excites me about our conversations in how can we make sure that we're talking about the difficult things in this industry? How can we make sure that when we think about you and your kind of peers and Fuck Me as a brand, and that there's a real kind of like, you know, we are going to stand up against the bad shit in this place, in this world. And I just think there's something really exciting about that.
I'm good. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
So you said you had two goals before.
Yeah.
And that second one was about the whole, as that we're kind of sorting this, was saying sex is, still enjoy it. Sex is good.
Massive,
sex is great.
Yeah.
Have you got any, like, is that your expertise, or is that a colleague who kind of helps with that a little bit more with people who are trying to find their way back with sex?
Well, all of us. So I take a lead in kind of sex work, adult entertainment stuff, and about positive sex. So I work with a couple of colleagues. So Dan, who's one of my colleagues, is very much engaged in leading the organisation into kind of like good sex, sexual health, making sure that you know your status, making sure that we are standing with George House Trust when we talk about HIV and U equals U, you know, undetectable means untransmissible, and, you know, like being really kind of like in your face about this kind of stuff. And then Graham, who, you know, if anybody's ever followed the Lesbian and Gay Foundation and originally Healthy Gay Manchester, the magazines out northwest, Graham used to produce all of those magazines. And so kind of like positive sex and healthy sex is kind of from a public health point of view, it's stuff that Graham's been on for donkey's years. And so what I want to kind of do is to sort of like step forward and say, right, okay, how do we start having these conversations?
Yeah. So I'm actually going to ask, like, what would you say to someone who has had an assault, has or realised about this trauma? It's brought up loads of shit, loads of bad memories, and they're struggling. To actually, they're just like, I can't be in the moment. I can't connect. I'm not in. They might not be enjoying it. They're just kind of like just scared. I don't know. I don't know what things you hear. What would you say to them?
So I would say that first of all, it's okay. That the more pressure that you put on yourself to be able to perform, to be able to get a hard on, it's effectively like as if you can just do it whenever you want to do it. That we've kind of got to take a little bit of pressure off ourselves. And so as a therapist, one of the things that I would do and have often done in talking to men who have had experiences where, you know, they kind of like get in that moment and then something happens, and it's not like a traumatic bit. It might be that someone says something, the people, their partner, the people that they're with, whether they're engaged in one-on-one sex or group sex, something happens that just kind of goes click and just takes them out of the situation, and then they just can't do it anymore. Where I would work with somebody in therapy around that is around we do this thing called sensate focus.
What's that?
So sensate focus is like it's like if you think about if every pad fingertip has got like it's like a scanner.
Okay.
And then all of the wires from the scanners go into your brain. What you've got to do is you're trying to remap your body.
Okay.
So one of the things in a sensate focus that you would do and you would work with somebody over is setting out a plan of how to, might sound a bit wanky this, but how to re-meet yourself. How do you get back in touch with your body? How do you get back in touch with your dick? And so, like, this is a very sort of like brief sensate focus.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Very brief sensate focus. So the first thing is I would say, right, okay, so I'm going to ban you from sex for a week. And we would have a bit of a laugh about it and like just take some of those sharp edges off. So no sex, no physical contact with somebody else, no wanking, like no dildo play.
A lot of people struggle.
Nothing. Yeah, but this is about the bigger picture. This is the long game.
I'm not saying don't, I'm just saying I know people that struggle.
Of course, which is problematic potentially. Yeah. And then what we would do is we'd say, right, okay, so next time you're in the shower, next time you're having a bath, like just focus on here upwards. And when you're having a wash, just dead generally, when you like washing, don't think about, do the washing, but then don't think about kind of like the quickness. Start feeling yourself. Start feeling like, well, what do my fingers feel like? Like, what does my neck feel like? What does my chin feel like? And effectively, it's like, you know, when you, on a photocopier, I always think about it like this. You lift the lid up on the photocopier, you put the thing down, then you put the lid, you press start, and then like that green light goes across it and it scans.
Oh, okay.
Do you know what I mean? That is effectively what I'm doing with my fingertips. Yeah. I am scanning my whole body. And you do it in sections. And so the first few days, I'd say, do it from here. Then the second bit, I'd be like, right, okay, so do your legs now. And then the third bit, do your belly. Like completely avoiding your bum and your dick and your balls. Because that then becomes like this area of, oh God, like I need to make sure that I can feel a certain way to them. And once we've done that kind of bit of mapping, then it's like, okay, so go and touch your bum for a bit. Go and play with your arse cheeks. Go and feel your dick. But don't come. Because what we're not doing is we're not teaching someone to masturbate better.
Yeah.
What we're doing is we're teaching someone to feel like their whole body and really get to understand it again.
Yeah.
And then once that kind of like that sensate focus, and normally we do it over like a few weeks and stuff, once it's done, people feel more. The best way I can ever describe it is probably my own experience. You feel like you wear your skin better.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. It feels like in some way, like, oh, like I fit better now. And then once you've kind of got better with yourself, once you've had a better relationship, you fit your skin better, then you can start engaging with other people. Okay. Then you can start like re-meeting your dick. You can start like thinking about, well, okay, with this new fitting of my skin, what do I want to do? What do I like? Where am I prepared to kind of go to? What bits did I used to do? And do I really want to do those things again?
Yeah.
And it's like building up this brand. It's like being reborn. Like
I was going to say,
virginity's reborn.
I was going to say a reclaimed virginity.
Yeah,
couldn't get my words out there.
Something like, and I honestly,
Interesting.
It's a really good way of kind of keeping a really positive sort of view of your own sex.
That was clearly, but is that just one method? Have you got quite a lot of different
methods? There's loads of methods to do stuff, but yeah, one method.
Yeah. So yeah, if people are having any issues, where was it again they would contact you?
So you can go to www.wearesurvivors.org.uk or go to Onit, www.onit.org.uk.
We did actually have some magazines, because I'm assuming, is this one way that people can support the charity while also getting something back?
Yeah.
Because we're actually in the magazine.
Yeah.
Bear with, I'm just going to grab these.
Sorry, that's my fault. I left them over there.
No, it was me. It was me. I should have got them. I should have had them ready. So there you go. There's one for you, one for me. There we go.
Da-da-da.
So do people have to order these off your website, or are they?
So you can download them
from
the website. Yeah. There's a digital version, and it's a podcast special because we've done a fair few podcasts on the front of it.
Oh, who's this handsome bastard?
Who's that?
Oh, who is it? So thanks for doing us a spread. That's awesome.
Genuinely, thank you for being part of it. And you know, like throughout the whole magazine, it's all about podcasts and stuff. There's also anybody wanting to buy a special Christmas present?
Yeah, you know about the calendar. I actually was just looking at that. So that's Above Average, which is another brand. So it's a clothing brand, and to be fair, Manchester-based as well, I believe. Yeah, there's another one to support.
The Manchester Bears are doing it for us.
Yeah, well, so the calendar is just guys. They've got all different types of everyday bears, and they're just getting together to help support yourselves.
Support us. Support the On It brand. Yeah.
So hey up, I know that dude. Yeah, there's a few people actually know.
They just came to us and they said, look, we do this calendar every year, and we always want to support charity. Like, we'd like to support On It, and we'd like to, and I think they're also supporting London Friend as well.
Oh, fair play.
Which is amazing.
So, obviously, this is a podcast special. What type of things do people get in this magazine?
So in it, there is
not just this one, but any random magazines.
So
we've
we've done 3 magazines up to now. So the first magazine had the front cover was Richard Gadd, who is one of our ambassadors. Most people know Richard from Baby Reindeer.
Oh, okay.
The Netflix smash hit.
I've not watched that yet. You know,
it's amazing.
Yeah, I need to.
Amazing. I am biased because Richard's my friend, but it's fucking brilliant. And what we did in that is we started like a theme. So we talked a lot in that about like who we are, about this idea of beginning to sort of break the silence, beginning to kind of talk to people about the difficulty of sex, the difficulty of abuse, the difficulty of kind of like, so like in the Baby Reindeer.
So a written form of what we've just done.
Yeah, literally. What
are people to expect going forward with this magazine?
More of what we started, because it's a bit of a slow burn. And what I mean by that is talking about sexual abuse and talking about sexual harms is kind of where we want to go with it. Talking about sexual harms and men as victims of sexual harms, men as survivors of sexual harms, men who have experienced sexual harms, still feels a little bit new.
Yeah.
We often hear about men as perpetrators of sexual harms, but we don't often hear about men as have experienced sexual harms.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said about the LGBT community. I just don't think we talk about it enough. And I don't mean it should be every time we all get together at our weekly gay meeting that we talk about it. I don't mean that at all. What I mean is, we kind of at some point, and I don't know when, I feel like we stopped giving a shit about each other.
Yeah.
I feel like in my day when I was kind of partying hard, we did genuinely, we looked after each other.
Well, back then, I think it was because there was a lot more homophobia then.
Absolutely.
That was the big fear. And now, because there's a lot less homophobia, there still is that, because there's less, they're forgetting about the other dangers, or the dangers within.
Yeah. And I think that there's something about, you're right, there's new dangers, there's new challenges, there's new fights, but I also think that people have, I don't know, definitely post-COVID, when everybody came out of lockdown, I'm sure we're all traumatised around that.
Yeah.
And I also think in some way, we all got a little bit selfish. Yeah. We got very focused on us and like, fuck you, Jack, I'm all right. I would love us. I genuinely would love us, definitely as a community, to just be a bit more together, look after us, look after each other, and look out for people. I was at an event a couple of days ago, and we were talking about bystander. So this idea of like, you see somebody that clearly doesn't look very well, they might be sat outside on the pavement, and what we do is we just walk past, where actually, who goes, are you all right? For the life of me, I can't remember the name of it, but there's that group around Manchester who go round... Village Angels. Yeah, that's it. Fair play to them. One of my friends, she actually does it. And I've been on a night out and I've been pissed so far. And she's like, hey, fan, hiya. She comes over and she just just looking out for people, making sure everyone's safe. We've got to get better at it, folks. We really have. And I think as well, something you sort of said to me that really sort of stuck in my brain, which is something about like this new world of content creation, this idea that actually people are, this isn't just a quick way to kind of hook up. This is professional. Yeah. This is people that are engaging in creating content of an adult nature, but like really thinking about what is it that they want to do, what are the boundaries, like people might want to push their boundaries in these settings. Fine. But there's discussions that go with it, and not just like, oh, I've got no money, like, oh, I'll start an OnlyFans and just, you know what I mean? Like, I want us to kind of think more about who are we as people? Who are we as a people? Who are we as a community? And I just want us to look after each other a bit more. Well, fantastic. I think it's a really good cause and everything that you're trying to do, and your mission statements, or your personal goals. I know they're personal, but I think that's just a good mission statement in general. So yeah, again, tell them where to find you for the 5th, 10th time, whatever. www.wearesurvivors.org.uk, and if you go on there now, you can read this from him. Oh, well, thanks for that. All right, well, cheers, Duncan, for coming on. Really appreciate that. So everyone, just make sure you tune in next week for the next episode of the Fuck Me podcast. Bye.